We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
And the crowd roared. But would it happen? If he became president, would President Trump actually do this?
Presidents before have said it. President looks like he's going to do it.
I know. He's saying he's going to do it today at 1 o'clock. I think that makes Ben Shapiro pretty happy. He's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, syndicated columnist and host of the Ben Shapiro Show. Ben, what are your thoughts? When did you hear that he was going to do this?
Oh, I had heard actually sort of off the radar last week, and I'd kept it under wraps. I was pretty excited about that. It's obviously an act of not only political bravery, but moral courage to move the embassy, but just to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The absurdity of the U.S. policy suggesting that Jerusalem was not Israel's capital has resulted in idiocies like the fact that my niece, who was born in Jerusalem, it says on her passport Jerusalem, and then it doesn't say which country she's from. Jerusalem is only important to the world because of Judaism. It's important to Christianity because it was first important to Judaism. It's important to Islam because it was first important to Judaism. Jerusalem is mentioned hundreds of times in the Jewish text. Jerusalem is in the Israeli national anthem. The culmination of Jewish history really was in 1967 with the recapture and the unification of Jerusalem under Judaic rule. The freedom of Jerusalem was only assured, by the way, because of that Jewish rule. What President Trump is doing is not just a recognition of reality. It's also an act of political usefulness, because all of the negotiations that have been happening for the last 20 years, for most of my lifetime, all of those negotiations have been preconditioned on stupidity, that Israel was going to give up its eternal capital, which is insane. I mean, in order to understand how dumb that is, you have to think that for Israel, Jerusalem is about 1,000 times more important than Washington, D.C. is to the United States. I mean, the founders put Washington, D.C. on a swamp because they just wanted it to be not part of any state. The reason that Jerusalem is where it is because the Bible says it is where it is. There's a religious adherence to Jerusalem that doesn't exist for normal capitals around the world. And for President Trump to recognize that this isn't going anywhere, that the freedom of Israel is just inherently connected with the freedom of Jerusalem, and that any negotiations that are to take place are going to have to be done by the Israelis themselves, and the Israelis are going to have to make decisions about what to do with their capital. Well, it's a ground shift, and it's a recognition of a reality that's necessary in order for real peace to be achieved in the region, not based on false stupidities that have been promulgated for the last couple of decades.
So they have 6 months to actually do it. They have a 6-month waiver to actually do it. Monday was the deadline to actually make the announcement. So today, we're going to get it today officially at 1 o'clock. But it will remain a divided city. That won't change. Does that bother you?
Well, I mean, it will remain a divided city because the fact is that the authorities have basically allowed terrorism to spread among the Palestinians, and East Jerusalem has largely been occupied by the same people it's been occupied for the last 7 decades, namely Muslims who live there. That part of the city is very dangerous. It's been very dangerous ever since I can remember, long before I was born. The fact is that when I visited Israel for the first time when I was 16 years old, Israeli soldiers had to guard us as we came out of the tunnels under the Western Wall into East Jerusalem, which, again, the capital of Israel. If you are a Jew and you walk into East Jerusalem, your life is in danger. If you're an Arab and you walk into West Jerusalem, there's no problem at all, which signifies exactly why Jerusalem should be under Jewish control and not under Muslim control.
Well, when it has been under control in Muslim areas, it has turned into terrorist havens, to your point. But Ben, we want to get your thoughts on another topic. The Supreme Court heard opening arguments yesterday about a case involving a man who bakes cakes in Colorado and who did not want to, or made it based on his religious beliefs, make a cake for a same-sex couple. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, a wedding cake for the same-sex couple. My apologies. Your take on the implications of this case, which will be heard now.
This case really isn't even about freedom of religion. It really is just about freedom of speech and freedom of association. So in this particular case, the baker not only was willing to make a cake for the same-sex couple, he was willing to make a cake for the wedding. He just wasn't willing to decorate it with pro-same-sex marriages. He also won't decorate cakes for divorce cases. He won't decorate cakes for Halloween, for example. This has nothing to do with religion. The question is, in your business, are you allowed to decide how you wish to use your skills and for which events you wish to use your skills? The question that I would ask to everyone on the left who opposes this baker, I mean, this is really an act of tremendous government tyranny. What I would ask people on the left is, let's say that you are a Barack Obama acolyte, you love the guy, and you write speeches for him. Let's say you're a speechwriter for President Obama. Can I walk into your business tomorrow and say, I now need you to write speeches for President Trump? And it doesn't matter if you don't like President Trump. The fact is, I have an equal access to your services, and you should be able to use your artistry for President Trump. Otherwise, you're discriminating. If you don't like that idea, you shouldn't like the idea of forcing a religious baker to violate his religious principles and violate his free speech in order to please you.
All right. Ben Shapiro, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ben.
Appreciate it, Ben.
And thanks a lot. President Trump making a major announcement. It's supposed to happen in about 45 minutes here. It's supposed to happen at 10 a.m. And that is it's an amazing thing. He's supposed to, the rumor is, not just announce that the United States' view now officially is that Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel, but also that he's going to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is a great and brave thing to do. And I'm going to give you a multiplicity of reasons why this is a great and brave thing to do by President Trump. And not something, frankly, that I expected from President Trump. Maybe the statement about Jerusalem being Israel's capital, because lots of presidents have said similar stuff, but not the statement about moving the embassy, because that's always been politically dicey. So the law is, and it has been since 1995, Congress passed a law, and they passed it overwhelmingly, that said that Israel's capital was Jerusalem and that it should remain undivided. That law was passed 93-5 in the Senate and 374-37 in the House in 1995. For years, the president has been waiving that law. Bush did it, Clinton did it, Obama did it. None of them would actually build the embassy because they supposedly didn't want to undercut the peace process. But really what it was about is they wanted to cater to and surrender to the whims of the Palestinian Authority, a terrorist group, as well as other Muslim nations that were propping up that terrorist group. This was stupid policy. So let's begin with the facts, okay? Jerusalem is, was, and will be the eternal capital of Israel. Jerusalem is only important. The only reason you've heard of it, the only reason anyone cares about it, is because the Jews made it important. Okay, that is literally the only reason. Otherwise, it's just another city in the Middle East. It was both the capital of the Kingdom of Israel and the site of the temple. It was the wellspring of Judaic thought for literally millennia. Okay, when I pray 3 times a day, Jerusalem is mentioned frequently in those prayers. Both Christianity and Islam value Jerusalem because Judaism did first. The dream of Jerusalem has animated the Jewish people for its entire existence. The most famous case being in Psalms 137, where it says, "If I forget thee, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill." Jerusalem is mentioned literally hundreds of times in what we call Tanakh. That'd be the Old Testament. So that includes the Torah, as well as the prophets and the writings. The only reason that it's not mentioned specifically in the 5 books of Moses is because at that time it was actually 2 cities, one called Yeru and the other called Shalem. And then it was put together into Yerushalayim, right? It became one city, sort of like Buda and Pest became Budapest. In any case, it's always been the center of Judaic thinking. It's always been the holiest spot in Judaism. Jerusalem, by contrast, is not mentioned one single time anywhere in the Quran. If Jews don't have a claim to Jerusalem, and this is the root of why Muslims want to declare that Jews don't have a claim, also it's the root of why the papacy has been really split on Jerusalem. Right? There have been popes who have been pro the idea of Jewish sovereignty in Jerusalem, and then the current pope says that it should be internationalized, which is just insipid. Because if you have Muslim rule over Jerusalem, that means nobody else gets to come in. And again, Jewish sovereignty over a Jewish holy site seems like the basic notion is just moral, especially since Jews have maintained the holy sites of both Muslims and Christians in Jerusalem. If Jews don't have a claim to Jerusalem, they don't have a claim to anything. They have claim to nothing. If they don't have a claim to Jerusalem, there's no claim to Tel Aviv, there's no claim to Haifa, there's no claim to Yaffo, there's no claim to Akko, there's no claim to any other city in Israel if you don't have a claim to Jerusalem. Okay, that's fact number 1. And Trump is recognizing an established fact on the ground. Number 2, as I say, Congress has long recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, not just in 1995, this year. Because you're seeing a bunch of Senate Democrats now, oh, how dare Trump? How terrible for President Trump to say this. How could President Trump he's going to lead to a conflagration. Well, that's not what you jerks were saying literally 6 months ago. In June, there was a resolution that was passed on the floor of the Senate. It was passed 90-0. 0 dissenting votes, 90-0. Saying that Israel's its eternal capital is Jerusalem and it should remain undivided. Okay, 3rd point. Recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital recognizes Israeli sovereignty. Okay, Israel gets to negotiate on its own behalf. It's not up to the United States or any other foreign nation to negotiate on Israel's behalf with regard to its own capital. To understand how important this is, imagine that foreign bodies came in and told the United States that we had to give up Washington, D.C. Now imagine that Washington, D.C. wasn't just a city that was built on a swamp so that we didn't have to build it inside a state. It had been divinely ordained by God for the American people. Okay, that's how important Jerusalem is to the Jews. It is the basis of all Judaic thought and all Judaic history. And people who are saying they're going to force Israel into making these concessions, it's immoral. Okay, Israel gets to make a call on its own. Okay, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital will minimize violence. You're hearing a lot of myths today from the left. Oh, look at it. Violence. Terrorism is coming. First of all, the Palestinian Authority is, was, and always will be a terrorist entity. Hamas is, was, will be a terrorist entity. Islamic Jihad is, was, will be a terrorist entity. All of the people threatening violence today were anti-Semites yesterday. They will be anti-Semites tomorrow. They were terrorists yesterday, and there will be terrorists tomorrow. If it's a day ending in Y, the Palestinian Authority is interested in murdering Jews in terror attacks. The same is true, of course, of Hamas. The idea that Jerusalem is the sticking point in negotiations is just not true. One thing that will happen by recognizing Israel's sovereignty over Jerusalem is that the Palestinians may lose hope that they can pry Jerusalem from Israel by pressuring the United States or pressuring the West through terror attack. Maybe they'll finally recognize reality, and they'll recognize this is just not going to be part of the negotiations.